It's on. Okay. Stuart Austin, welcome to the Regenerative Journey and welcome to room 14 at, where are we? Stockman's Motel.
Appropriately named motel, that's for sure.
In Tamworth.
Yep,
Thank you,
beautiful
Stockman's, for providing the location for today's interview with Stu, who we were at Windy Station yesterday, and which we might get to talking about in a minute. But we were staying in the same hotel, and this is one of the few opportunities we've actually had to catch up, Stu, and had the time.
Yeah, and need to make a public apology for formal apology for blowing you off. Whenever it was in the first series, and I was just too busy.
That's fine.
Had I known the stardom that it might have created back then, I would have made far more time. But it's funny that we don't cross paths more often.
No, it's a bit sad, to be honest, because we're operating in the same and similar space, but I guess it's just geography, logistics. You're actually not. I spend a lot of time at Byron Bay, and you're only 4.5 hours away when the road's open.
Yep. And I don't spend much time in Byron Bay.
No, you don't. Not enough. No,
Exactly.
You have to think of
that's more the point.
You have to take Trish and the kids up there more often, mate. When she hears this, she'll go, "Yes, Stuart, you should do that every month."
That's it.
So, mate, as I am known to do, I like to interview my guests in their happy place, on the veranda of their home, on their farm, in their place of work. We haven't actually achieved that today, but what I have achieved is we're looking. I've got a. I didn't get the King Spa suite that you had last night, but my basic room does look out to the west, and we're looking at a paddock. There's a bit of a paddock there, but there's grass that I was reflecting on this morning, thinking that the way they've mown that, it actually looks like a lot of the Australian landscape for most of the year, which might be something we can talk about. But mate, we've done our best. We're looking out. We've got at least grass and some trees to look at. So that's as good as it gets today.
Yep, and I think I can take you there to Wilmot. We can.
Yeah.
When I start talking about the place, that, as I think I did yesterday about Morocco, when you love what you do so much and enjoy where you live and feel so grateful to be there, I suppose it's easy to talk about. So.
Well, let's take us there, because my first question is about what does it mean to you to be in the Australian landscape, in specifically Wilmot, where you live. And I know you've got Wilmot Cattle Co has a number of properties up this part of the world, but we're sitting at the veranda of your place. What are we thinking about? What are you talking to me about there? When you look out at your longhorn cattle,
those boys, they're beautiful cattle and good fun to have out the back door. The core of it is, as I think I just mentioned a minute ago, it's such a privilege to manage such a spectacular property. I don't take it for granted any day of the week. And every time I drive around that farm, or I'm in the paddock, I just feel so bloody lucky, really, so fortunate that to be managing, in a broader context of the Australian landscape, that small piece of it, and I feel a huge responsibility to make sure that it's well looked after, as we do with our other two farms. So and that's what gets me out of bed every day is the privilege to manage part of the landscape in Australia that we do, and the opportunity to restore the ecology of it.
There's probably a few days in winter you don't want to get out of bed though. It gets pretty fresh up there, doesn't it?
Look, I can find out nowadays my role is predominantly office based, and it's amazing how much work I have to do in the winter. End of financial year, it's a busy time.
Budgets.
Or Jimmy probably wonders what I'm doing there.
He see you like once a week. You pop your head out. You're right, Jimmy. Yeah, mate. No worries. So, and you're dead right. I mean, I have had the pleasure of being visiting Wilmot a number of times now. You're famous, and you've done them for 3 years now. 3 years now.
Yep.
Your Wilmot Field Days in sort of February, March. Or no, you had one in.
It was April this year. It won't be next year. It'll be back to February.
Yeah, a good call. Thank you. Can you just make sure Al knows? Is he Al know?
He knows.
He knows.
Yeah.
And so I've been to the first two, missed the one this year, and I visited another couple of times when Al was there, and we had Patrick Holden, who was there.
Yep.
At one point. So anyway, beautiful property. We had to look at you've got some amazing waterfall, just a beautiful part of the world that is. You've had some challenges there too with the bushfire a couple of years ago, which we can get to. But no, I have to say, if you ever have the opportunity to get to one of the field days there in February every year, then I absolutely encourage you to do that, because it's a wonderful group of speakers, just a wonderful location to be there, and we'll make sure when you do get the dates right next year, we'll pump them out for our listeners.
For sure.
Let's launch into your regenerative journey, Stu. Like early, take us back as far as you want to go to any poignant moments that sort of any starting points. Maybe the day of your birth, which is probably not a day you particularly remember much about.
I don't know, but look, full disclosure, I was actually born in Victoria, which now it's out there, right?
Oh my God. Well, that was a lovely interview, Stu. We love Victorians.
But I was lucky enough to grow up in Albury. We moved to Albury when I was young, and on a small farm outside town there when I was probably, 10, I suppose, 10 or 11. Just a little block that we leased. And my father bred working dogs. So that was what we did on that little block. Spent a lot of time feeding the dogs. A lot of time.
Was that one of your
more than
one of your chores, your jobs for the day or
my
the morning?
job, morning, night.
Yeah. Did you get paid? Did you get paid? Like a couple of cents a dog or something?
Look, it's probably a place best not gone, but there was an arrangement that it was an arrangement. Anyway, I spent.
There was some remuneration.
Correct. But I did. My grandfather, Mum's father, had a place in the Upper Murray, and that was probably where my formative years were spent. When I was a teenager, every bloody spare weekend, any time, every school holidays, there was a mail bus run from Albury up to Jingellic, and I was on the bus at 1:30 on a Friday afternoon and come back on 10 o'clock on Monday morning. And he was, my grandfather was, by far the most influential person in my life when I was at that age.
Age like primary school?
Teenager.
Okay.
When you need that nice guidance, I suppose, in your life. He was an incredible man who was an outstanding gentleman and taught me, really instilled some core values in me that I try to aspire to every day, still now. He actually managed a big place up there for 20 odd years, and then he bought a place that they had for about 20 years. And I spent a lot of time, everybody, a spare minute up there. So that was my foundation in the beef industry, I suppose, and I blame him for me bloody being here. But I feel very, very lucky that I am here. So.
And what happened then? So formative years down south, cutting your teeth on dogs and cattle.
And then up north, we went up north on a family holiday in 1991. Mum and Dad put 4 kids and them in the Isle of Ford station wagon. And the one memory I have of that trip was Mum, when whoever was sitting in the front was either my little sister or I, whoever was in the dicky seat in the middle. Sit still, don't turn around, sit still, don't turn around, you break your neck, sit still, don't turn around the whole way, because the seat only came up to here,
Oh,
the back of the seat.
In the Ford. Was it a Ford Falcon?
It was, the old Falcon station wagon, yeah. Anyway, it was a great trip. We spent 3 weeks or a month, I think, we went right up through Queensland and then back down through the centre. But we went to Newcastle Waters, who Sal Arnott and Mum nursed together in get the date wrong here, it was the late 60s, early 70s.
Careful.
Yeah, so, it was a little while ago.
Yeah.
And they were great mates, and so I had that connection at Newcastle Waters. So when I left school, this was back in the days before emails, I think I typed a cover letter, application letter.
With your
Typed it up on the vertigo, yep. And sent that up there, applied for a job there basically in a stock camp, and was lucky enough to get a start. Was going up there for a year. I'd got into rural science at UNE on an early entry, and I think my marks weren't quite good enough to actually get in had I not got that early entry spot, but got this start at uni that Mum and Dad were determined that I needed to get. And
so sorry, you did it, how many years were you?
Well, I went up north for a year, and I was doing the gap year thing, coming back to uni.
So you deferred?
I did.
Yeah, you deferred. Okay, if you had that year up there, deferred the course.
And I had such a good time that I tried to defer again, and they wouldn't let me. So I said, "Well, I'm sorry, but I'm enjoying where I'm at far more than I think I will at uni." So stayed up there, and ended up doing nearly 5 years up there, and that just went very quiet. Is that still working?
Yeah.
Well, my headset did.
Did it? You can't hear?
No.
Still not hearing?
No.
Oh, hang on,
There
people.
you go.
Yeah, it might be some little loose connection there. It's not that old, this gear. Is that all right?
That's better.
Yeah, cool.
Sorry.
Fire already.
So I had nearly 5 years up there, and same thing. I worked for some really capable people up there, some pretty bloody hard men in those first few years.
All at Newcastle Waters there? 5 years?
No, I did 2.5 years, I think it was, with CPC. And by the third year, then I went to Killarney and was running a stock camp there. At the grand old age of 21, responsible for 7 or 8 girls and boys, basically, who were all also very young, in a very remote environment. I think back now that I didn't see anyone die, but I saw.
It's a reality show right there.
It is, mate. After I left up there, and people ask me what it's like, and the only thing I could liken it to probably was being in the army, where you live, eat, sleep, and breathe with the same crew of blokes for weeks on end. You absolutely bust your ass working. It's a real. It's a fantastic place for young people to really spend some time, I suppose. Not so much cut their teeth, but spend some time and just learn about how understand initiative and how you've got to think for yourself, and mum's not going to do your washing anymore, and like grow up bloody quick and turn kids into adults.
Any sort of stories from that time? I mean, I guess anything you learnt or that you could, because I trust that still happens up there. That there's still, I mean, I imagine the numbers are probably a bit lower potentially, whether that's because they're not turning up or the jobs are changing a little bit with a bit more technology. But what are some of the things that you learnt in that time about yourself?
Well, one of the biggest changes in my life happened when I was 21, I reckon. After my third year up there, and I'd had about 6 months running a stock camp, and I tried to run a camp the way the blokes that I'd worked for ran the camps, which was not terribly pleasant.
Not very
nice people to work for. Very hard men, basically, who, the only time you knew you were doing the right thing was when you weren't getting a tune-up, basically.
Right.
There wasn't a great deal of calm instruction. It was more
yelling
when you weren't doing the right thing.
Yeah, okay, sure.
Which can, I used to often think about the word effective communication. We all, it's often thrown around about how to be an effective communicator, and I used to think back to those days, I used to think, well, they were very effective. And so the use of the word effective can be taken quite out of context quite quickly.
Yeah, good call.
So anyway, I left up there that year, and it was actually coincidentally the year that Trish and I first had a relationship. We met at Killarney, and
is she there working?
Working in camp, as a jewellery.
Oh, nice.
Anyway, she quite unceremoniously left me at the end of that year, which I was quite devastated by. Young love, and I also didn't have many of those blokes that had worked for me, or girls that year that worked for me, coming back again the next year. And that was always a reflection of how good a headstock you were, right? Was how much of your crew was coming back next year to go again.
That's a bit of a benchmark, isn't it?
So
KPI.
Yeah, exactly. And I'd been home for a couple of weeks, and I really started to think about it. I thought, Jesus, maybe it's me. And my father's a fairly what's the word? He has a different personality, I suppose, and I was reminded of his personality by some of my early headstockmen, and that I was potentially heading down a similar path, which was not a terribly pleasant person to be around at times. So there was a bit of inner reflection that was, I suppose, looking back now, thinking about yourself when you're 21. There's probably not many people do that, but I did, and I can't remember how that came about. My sister gave me a book called You Inc., written by John McGrath, and that book changed my life. I basically said it was all about being, a far more positive person, how to create an enjoyable workplace. His story around, going from a aspiring football player at university, broke his leg, ruined his footy career, stumbled around in the wilderness for a while, and then decided he wanted to be the world's best real estate agent.
Okay, that's McGrath.
From McGrath Real Estate. So he went to the States, interned for the best real estate agent in the US, and now he's got an amazing, an amazing business. So there's all these things in there, right, about how to create a really positive workplace culture. And he was in a, real estate agent's office in Sydney, and I was running a stock camp in the Northern Territory. And some of the things that are there, right, he talked about goals. So he said, write your goals out and stick them. He said, I laminate them and stick them on the wall in my shower. He said, I have a shower twice a day, so I read my goals twice a day. And I thought, well, I have a shower under a coolie tree with a tarp around it in the dark, so I probably won't be able to read them, but I did have to write my diary every night, so I did it all in all these big colourful pens and wrote a few goals and stuck them in my diary every night when I turned the page over there. So that was
Did you move, I'm interested in that, so they were on one sheet and you just moved them forward a day? So you
bookmark.
Good, that's a great idea.
Yeah, so anyway, and I came up with this motto of positive perfection, where I wanted to be, our camp to be, the best camp basically, and have a few benchmarks and a few goals to aspire to, knowing that recognising that we would never be perfect, but if we aspire to be perfect, we'd be the best. And a much more positive culture. I wanted people patting each other on the back all day and really pumping each other's tyres up, and a real positive, helping people all the time, every day, teaching these young guys everything they needed to know so that they could do their job to the best of their ability. Rather than where I had come from, where it was you had to bloody figure it out yourself, and like I say, if you didn't figure it out, you heard about it until you did figure it out. Then you didn't know much all. And I remember there was actually a pretty pivotal moment. There was a girl who'd been there the year before, and she'd gone away and done a top licence and came back the next year. She used to come back on weekends and give us a hand, and she was great with the weaners, and we did a lot of weaner education then, which I really enjoyed. And I said to her one afternoon, we were in the yards just tidying up, and I said, I've got to go, but would you mind just putting those weaners away and a couple of other jobs? And she kind of looked at me and she said, what the hell's wrong with you? And I said, what do you mean? She said, why are you being so nice or something? And I said, well, I've changed. And it was I'll never forget it. It was like she was shocked that I was speaking to her so nicely. And
your language was different.
Yeah.
Your approach, you were using like maybe please and thank you,
Exactly.
as opposed to, what would you have said to them? And I want to take you back. I don't want to. Just quickly, this might hurt a little bit. But I'm just.
I would have been a lot more direct.
No, but you can use whatever colourful words you need. I'm just interested because it's really important language.
I would have been in a hurry. I would have said, put those weaners away, feed those cattle, have your horses ready for tomorrow.
That was
And people would be wondering which weaners, which yard, where do you want them to go, what cattle are we feeding hay to, what horse do we need tomorrow, are we going mustering or are we just tailing weaners? And you just kind of go, righto, and they'd stumble off, and then the next day when they had the wrong horse, then they'd hear about it. Or that they'd fed the wrong lot of cattle, they'd hear about it.
So it was always going to be their fault.
Correct. And And so it was
even though
I realised that excuse me, people need a bit more direction, right, and a bit more clarity. And again, it comes back to the effective communication around, excuse me, feed that mob of cattle, and we're going marketing tomorrow. This is we'll be going at daylight.
Put it in context.
15 k's, blah blah blah. Make sure you ride that horse or that horse. That calf that you broke in last week is probably not going to be suitable. Blah blah blah. Just a bit more context exactly around what we're doing, what we're getting up to.
And this was your first engagement with her since she's been back.
Yeah,
so
she used to only come back on weekends, that sort of thing. So she hadn't sort of seen any exposure to it.
She's gone, where's that other Stuart Austin
gone?
So just on that, then what were you thinking? Like, when she said that to you?
I suppose it was a little moment of recognition or reflection that I had changed, that people and someone had really noticed it. Because there was a couple of really young guys, like Stuart Webster was only 13, 14, young Indigenous kid from Untitled. Very, very handy person. One of the most naturally gifted people I've seen with horses or cattle, and he was my main man. He was, at that age. And so he was back, and another young guy from Brisbane, Depasquale, who's now runs a very successful contracting and mustering company up there. Who came out of Brisbane, who had never been on a horse in his life the year before. So those two guys are still there. So they saw that change, I suppose, from year 1 to year 2. But they were the only two that had seen it. And the others, it was just they turned up for probably a better bloke to work for that year than the blokes who turned up the year before to work for not such a good bloke. So and girls, we had that's one of the biggest things that's changed up there is there's more girls than blokes up there nowadays.
Is that right? Why do you think that is?
I don't know. I ran a recruitment business when I was in Canada, and we used to get 70% of girls apply for jobs, and they just had the initiative to put together a resume and a cover letter and some information and get themselves sorted. Where as blokes, we tend to kind of just figure it out as we go.
I think we're just going to sail into a job.
Yeah.
And just to put things in a context for our international listeners, where you were, just explain where you were in terms of Australia, the state and the area, because it's not just down the road from where we are. It's a fair way away.
No, so the Northern Territory is the central northern part of Australia, and so Newcastle Waters was 400 kilometres south of Katherine on the Stuart Highway. Killarney was 300 k's south of Katherine down to Buntine. Killarney, I think, was a bit over probably 1.5 million acres or thereabouts. Newcastle Waters is 10,000 square kilometres, right? So which is 100 kilometres by 100 kilometres, and it was fairly well a square block. So that's sort of the scale of the operation. And I used to think about that down here. That's like driving from here to Gunnedah to Cooler across to bloody Scone or something.
As big as
all
that.
one place.
Hey, you know what? I can hear that bloody fridge. Can you hear that fridge? I can hear that fridge. I want to ask you a question. I want you to keep going. I'm going to run out there and turn that fridge off. I reckon I can hear that little, the shells in it rattle.
Yeah, right.
I better give you a question to answer then. Let's talk about, we're jumping around a bit, but what about women in agriculture? Well, you just touched on it there. Give us, it's interesting that, as you say, they've got the intelligence, absolutely, and the initiative to go and write themselves a good CV and then do it. I mean, what's your sort of thoughts on, women in ag today? Just pretend I'm here for a minute.
For sure. They have a huge role to play, and I mean, we have Trish works in our business, and so does Lisa, who's our admin girl, and I work with so many capable women up north, down here, everywhere we go, we see come across very capable women, and I suppose it's what I used to find up north was it was challenging for them to take that step into a head stockman role, and there's only a few that did, or be given that opportunity for whatever reason. like I say, just as capable as any bloke. Plenty of them more capable than most blokes. And so I think then, you know, the career path of them was for the women was a bit more unsure, where, you know, if you look at the hierarchy up there, most head stockmen are blokes, most managers are blokes, and so for a young bloke up there,
You've got somewhere to go.
there's a pretty clear direction as to where you can get to.
Yeah.
And the other part of it then too, that I have found is having children. That, you know, and particularly for Trish, you know, she's had a wonderful career, and she really has pushed herself and developed an enormous amount of knowledge. I'm sure she's bloody smarter than me. She's got more degrees to her name than I do. She is smarter than me, correct. But I know
all our wives and partners generally are.
Correct. Yes. I know that's been challenging for her, where she, you know, she's just got a tea stuck into something, and then we decide to have another child. So happening again in a few weeks, but there won't be any more after that. So then she can get back to getting stuck in her career. But so that's a challenging thing. And I was involved in some young farming groups, and it was the same thing. You know, we were all, there's a stage in life, I think, from maybe it's 25 to 35, where you've had those few years out of school, you might have been to uni, you've had a few jobs, you're kind of figuring out what you want to do. You get involved in some of those groups, and then all of a sudden you get a new job, or you get married, or you're having children, and all of a sudden your ability or time, prioritisation of your time changes. And I think it's I think I probably did the same through that 10-year period, really chopped and churned a bit, I suppose, and I was involved in some young farming groups, and it was the same thing. There was times where I just had to say, look, I'm sorry, but I've been very committed to this group, and I've actually got to step away because I've got other priorities that are more important. And it's, you know, and I look at our state farming organisations now, they're largely made up of an older generation, and they're all crying out for young people to get involved, but I'm in exactly that same situation where I'm not quite 40 and we've got 3 little kids, and I just can't justify adding that to the mix of extracurricular activities, I suppose. So
I want to get back to that, I guess, and the word there is prioritising, you know, what's important and what's urgent and all those things. Let's get back to your stories, Stu. You're up in, you're up north. There's a change in your behaviour that's sort of reflected in, I guess, other people are seeing that. And how was your change in behaviour reflected in your workplace?
It was very well supported for a start. I went back up there after I read that book, and I was actually on the plane back to Darwin reading most of that book, and I had the old Earler's notebook out writing all these notes and the things I was going to do. And I used to write positive quotes on the fridge in the stock camp, or jokes on the fridge, you know, just to add a bit of something different to the camp. And anyway, I sat down with our manager up there, who's now my brother-in-law, Lux Lethbridge, who you know, I had an enormous amount of respect for, and was a huge mentor for me through that 5 or probably 10-year period, I reckon. And I sat down with him and I said, look, you know, I think I've got to change, I've got to do something better, you know, I feel like I'm a bit of an arsehole to work for, and he said, that's fantastic. And he was very supportive of it, you know.
Did he agree that you'd been an arsehole?
Yeah.
He did?
Yeah. And you know what, a big part of it is maturity. It's this whole pride and ego and this tough thing where you got to, you know, and that was the blokes I worked for, right? They were the toughest men in the camp, so you had to be that, and it's bloody ridiculous. And once we got over that, and I just said, look, you know, I just want people to enjoy getting out of bed and going to work every day. So Lux was, you know, he was very supportive, and I was there for, I did that, you know, I used to say that was the best year of my life, was 2004 at Killarney, where we just had so much fun. We did things differently. It was my, you know, a real exposure, probably my first real exposure to doing things quite differently, and that being a good thing. So it was owned by a bloke called John Quintana, and who was an American. He won the world title, bull riding title in the 70s, and so John brought a lot of American culture to that business, and to the point where we branded all the calves with a rope. And a lot of people used to think that was quite cruel. And I said, but when we explained it to them, that it was actually all about horsemanship and cattlemanship, and that it was actually quite calm and low stress. It wasn't yah-yahing. It was, we did everything, most things at a walk. And as soon as that calf was branded, it was let back up onto its mother, and it was a real art. And John taught us that, the art of it all. It's like being taught to be polite, I suppose. All the manners of branding, basically, and it gave all our crew a whole other skill set. And I still ride with a rope on a saddle if I'm on a horse, when I'm on a horse. And it's just another tool that you can use to do a job if you need to. But we branded 10,000 calves that year with a rope. And
when you say rope, as in you were...
So we would head and heel a calf. So the first person, you're riding into a mob, and you'd find a calf and rope its head, and it would come around behind you, and this is all at a walk. And the next bloke would ride in there and catch its heels, and then the bloke on the head would release the tension, and the bloke on the heels would just turn around and ride out the gate to where there's guys on the ground there. They would just hold that calf down, brand it, dehorn it, you mark it, vaccinate it, take both the ropes off, it would get up and run over to its mum.
In what, over a couple of minute period?
Yeah.
So you'd almost be over for it and knew it.
Yeah.
So no drafting, no upper race,
no
crush,
yep.
Bang bang. Yeah, cool.
So and like I say, it was about horsemanship. Blokes had to understand how to handle their horse and do that without thinking about it, because they had to be thinking about what that calf was doing and where they were riding and what and how they're handling their rope. So it was very slow, calm, steady. It was good for people, good for horses, good for cattle. And John used to say, God made a horse and God made a cow and God made a cowboy. And so it was great fun. That whole year was just good. We worked bloody hard, but it was really good fun. And every day, it seemed like every day, John would come to us and say, right, we're going to do this way. And we couldn't hate. We just said, okay, right. And we just had to find a way to do it. And I've still got that motto today. Anytime someone comes to me, and if Al says to you, I want you guys to do this now, I say, okay, let's get on with it. Let's figure out a way to do it. We didn't have time to resist or argue the point or say that was a silly idea or say, right, let's get on with it. So it was just, I think back now and how much that developed me as a person, that ability to think differently, to accept change, to that positive culture that we created there. It was all founded on bloody hard work. Talking about women in ag, I remember that year we had 4 girls in the weaner camp branding weaners, and we didn't brand them with a rope, but so these weaner cradles are bloody heavy, and they would brand, I can't remember, we used to do 500 or 600 weaners in a day, I think it was, and my grandfather was there, and he had 4 daughters. He came up there for holiday, and he had 4 daughters, and the only place they weren't allowed when they were children was in the yard. That was a place for the blokes. And he actually went and found Lux, and he gave Lux a good tune up and said, what are these girls bloody doing over there lifting that cradle? And Lux just said, they're fine. They are perfectly capable. And my sister was one of them, Belinda, and then Rach was there, and I think Trish was in that camp for a little while. And it was just that was how we did things. So it was a really formative year, and for probably the next 10 years, I used to look back and go, that was the bloody best year of my life. Like I said, Lux and my sister are now married. They've got 2 kids, and they're still on a place in the Pilbara in Western Australia, and still living that lifestyle. But yeah, that was where it was.
Trish came back. That second year?
I took it. No, she didn't actually. No, that was a real thing, right? But she stayed up there. She went and worked at another place for a couple of years, and then got a job with the DPI, and spent 10 years with the DPI up there. So yeah, and why did I leave up there? I got to. I was going to go flying. Not an uncommon story for young blokes who've been up there for a few years.
You're going to get your license and
get on a chopper. So, and I still love flying. It's one of every time I get in an aeroplane, it's the best feeling in the world, and it's still on my list of goals. It's been in my 10-year goals for about 10 years.
You've been moving that one through your pages in your diary.
Yeah, talking about prioritising. Anyway, So I left up there, actually went and worked on a road crew for 12 months.
Oh, no, I'll ask you that question about gold later. Sorry, yeah, 10 months.
To try and make some money. That was also good fun. We started in Tully in North Queensland and finished in Tasmania 12 months later. So we travelled, we were 3 weeks on, 1 week off, different town, different pub every night, didn't save any money, had a great time. Worked with a bunch of grumpy old blokes, but saw a bit more of Australia, and then
How long was that?
12 months. Yeah. And then got a job in a feedlot. Was going with a girl from St George, and you know, as was the way with any of those construction, civil, mining type jobs, it's always a girl that pulls you out of there when you're 23. And so was in a feedlot in Southern Queensland, and that was a different experience. Again, I was only there for about a year, but it was a really interesting year. I learnt that whole feedlot sector and how that works, and the intricacies of that, the ins and outs of it. I was a livestock supervisor there of a feedlot. It was a whole different world to the Northern Territory, but it was another part of the supply chain. And then I went to Canada, having had that time up north with John and that American culture, and we had guys from the States who used to come out and work out up there with us. And then the bloke that I was working for in the feedlot, Will Lane, he'd spent a lot of time in the States, and I was like, mate, I've got to go and see what this is all about. So you can't actually work legally in the States. I said to Will, what have I got to do? And he said, just get a passport and a plane ticket and head over there. You'll be right. You'll get on a ranch and shoot some horses or break some colts in or something, you know.
In the US?
Yeah.
But as opposed to Canada?
Well, yes, but you can't just, my mother, bless her soul, she said, she did a bit of research for me. I was ready to just buy the plane ticket and go to the post office with the passport and go. And she said, well, you can't actually do that legally in America. What about Canada? You can get a visa for there, you can get a working holiday visa for there, and you know, maybe that's a better idea. So thankfully she did that, and away I went. And same thing, I was going over there for a year, just to have a bit of fun, have a year off. I was at a point where I'd been in leadership positions there, I suppose, or been pushed into leadership roles for the few years before, and realised I was like 24 or something, 25, and I just thought I need to be a kid. I didn't have, you know, all my mates had just done 4 years at uni where they'd had a bloody ball, and I thought I just want to go and have some fun and be a kid for a while and not have any responsibility. So I went over there and probably did that in a sense. I ended up on a ranch, which I wasn't intending to be, but I was a guide on a guest ranch. So we used to take 8 guests at a time back into the Rocky Mountains for 2 to 4 days at a time. And it was a bloody great fun. I met people from all over the world. Yeah. We camped in these cabins, packed everything in on the back of a horse. Absolutely spectacular scenery. And the people was what I enjoyed. We'd sit around the fire at night and you'd hear these stories from people from all over the world. And I didn't realise that the world is so bloody small. You know, you get on a plane tomorrow and you'd be on the other side of the world, and different culture, different people. And the same thing, I enjoyed that so much that I stayed over there for 3 years. Ended up working on a broadacre seed growing business in eastern Alberta, and one of the challenges I found when I was over there was finding a job on a real farm. Like I was on this guest ranch, and it was a ranch, but you know, the kind of ranches that the blokes that used to come from the States to work over here that they worked on, that was what I wanted to try and get to. And I just couldn't find it. I couldn't find the land over there basically to find the job. So when I did, I was like, you know, I had plenty of mates. This is the era, the advent of Facebook about then. We're talking 2008, 9, 10, I was over there. So they're all messaging, how do you get a job, where do I go, how do I get a passport, how do I get a visa, blah, blah, blah. And so I started this little business where we would mentor people through the process of getting a passport, getting a visa, getting a plane ticket, and getting a job. And found another bloke over there. And he had spent a few years in Australia, and from a ranch over there, big operation, that had been employing Aussies for quite a few years because they really appreciated the work ethic of young Aussies. So he was about to start doing the same thing, and I said, well, you find the jobs and I'll find the people. So we had this great little partnership where I did exactly that, and I was working on the farm and finding people 2 o'clock in the morning doing interviews, from a bunkhouse, and to the point where that got pretty busy, and so busy that I couldn't do both. And I was about ready to come home, so I came home and still did that, and fumbled around a bit with other jobs for a couple of years there. That was a recruitment business that we started, and it was really good fun. Again, I used to say it made a lot of dreams come true for a lot of young people, and people who wouldn't ordinarily have got over there had we not mentored them through that. And girls, the amount of girls that applied, and because they had the initiative, right, they had you'd say you need to get a passport, you need to get a visa, this is where you do that, this is how you do it, you need to get a plane ticket, this is where you need to fly into. They get it all organised. You tell young blokes that, and they go, oh Jesus,
it's too hard.
Yeah, it's too hard.
What was it called? What was the name of your business?
Called it Positive Perfection.
Ah, right.
Which everyone's like, what the hell's that? Which was a kind of a good thing, right? Because it was just, Stuart Austin recruitment. You probably no one would remember it, but called it something different, so people used to wonder what it was. And I got involved in a lot of young farming groups too at that point, which I really enjoyed. That opportunity to contribute to the industry and help other people through that platform. When I left there, I was the chair. There was 2 young farming groups in Alberta, and I was the chair of both of them. And that raised a few eyebrows. What was this young Aussie doing, being the chair
of 2 of them? Cross-pollinating these 2 farmer groups. He's a mole sent from Australia to take away good stuff.
Yeah,
classic. So you got back home?
Came back, and I had one pretty ordinary job there for a little while, and then I was kind of drawn to go back up north. That was where I felt comfortable, I suppose, and ended up working for a rural training company in North Queensland. And then we were going to expand on the recruitment business into a backpacker training business. So the amount of backpackers that come to Australia, getting them upskilling them a bit, giving them some training.
In what?
Just station skills, basically.
Yeah.
Very basic training for a week or 10 days, and sifting through the ones that could had some evidence of initiative and common sense.
Yeah, right.
Basically, saying the ones that had a bit of get up and go, and then helping them find a job.
So you basically spun that on its head. You were back in Australia.
Yeah.
Doing the reverse, getting them over here.
Anyway, it turns out we did all the market research, and it turns out they do come here for the longest, and they do come here for the most money, but they make it last, and they don't want to spend it. It was a very hard lesson in business. It cost me a lot of money. It basically sent me broke, but I just worked my way out of it.
So they basically, people weren't willing to pay you to help them work that out.
They all wanted the job, but they didn't want the training to get the job.
That's interesting.
So
is that a lesson in do the research before you start the business?
Absolutely.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Or do the right research. I think with the research we've done, gave us the answers we thought we were looking for, but it wasn't quite. Again, my mother, being the amazing guidance that she has been for my whole life, I think from the day that every year that I was up north, she used to, because I tried to defer from UNE for a second year and they wouldn't let me, and I said, okay, well, give my spot to someone else. And then from every year after that, about September every year, she'd send me the Marcus enrollment forms.
Yeah.
Which she did again in 2011 when that business I had to kind of accept that wasn't going to work, and bloody churned up through all my money, and I was actually in a fairly ordinary place mentally, and she said maybe it's a good time to go to Marcus, and I finally succumbed and said yes, I think you might be right, Mum. And the timing was perfect.
Age what?
20. I was 28 when I went down there.
Yeah.
2012. One of the most valuable investments I've ever made in myself. So I realised I needed to learn about budgets, P&Ls, balance sheets, trading accounts, cash flows, all that side of it that I had just taken for granted that it'll be right. That was what I needed, was this business skills, and went down there, and that's exactly what I learned. I was only down there for a year. but it gave me that business foundation, and that's what our industry, and so many people in the industry are lacking, is those business skills or that business knowledge, I suppose. So yeah, went down there and a great year. Obviously, it's a good fun. And Trish and I got back together that year. So 9 years later, I say that she came to her senses 9 years later.
How was she down there?
No, so we had to do a 3-month placement, and obviously, I still like that northern environment up there. And she put me in touch with her. We'd still Trish and I had been great mates right through that whole time, and kept in touch. And my sister and her, they were based up north, so they were still good mates. And anyway, I said, look, we've got to do this placement. Is there anyone you'd suggest? And she put me on to a guy called Steve Petty, who had a business in Canada as a consultant working with pastoral landholders up there. So got on to Steve, and I did 3 months with him. And so I was in Canada, and Trish was in Catherine, and many a weekend, buddy, jumped in this Prado and raced across from Canada to Catherine.
How many hours is that?
Trish, about, it should be 5, but with an open speed limit, you can do it much quicker. I used to see how quick I could do it. Anyway, so Trish and I got back together, and then at the end of that year, so I finished college, did the 12 months down there, and I got the piece of paper, but I got the knowledge that I needed. And that was, it's a really well put together 12 months. So went back up north, and actually landed a job with the university up there, initially overseeing the stud at the rural college outside Catherine.
Oh, yeah.
And then they also had the lease on Mataranka station that they'd had for a long time, designed to be training students and as a commercial cattle operation. So I was pretty excited. So then, not long after I'd started as the overseer, then got the manager's job at Mataranka. Went down there, full of enthusiasm to implement some changes down there and make that. My goal was to make it. They had this advisory committee that was made up of pastoralists and the DPI and the university, and it was about what can we do with that place to really use it to its full potential, I suppose. So because we had a good relationship with the DPI, Trish at the DPI and us, and they did some brilliant research up there, those guys. That team in Catherine was fantastic, still is. And so I wanted to take those research outcomes and implement them at a commercial scale for industry, to demonstrate to industry that this research was really valuable and had legs and worth implementing on your commercial operation. Very, very challenging. Again, pushed me to places mentally that I don't like to go back to, where, I'm a fairly progressive, proactive, impatient person. Want to get on with it, and that university structure and hierarchy is quite the opposite, where very conservative, low risk, didn't want to do too much different.
So there was research that had been done, and you wanted to implement it. So it was a natural sort of thing to go on. Okay, let's go and put this on a bigger scale. And was a red tape, ethics committees, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, that was a big part of it. There was an animal welfare disaster there, and a few years before I don't know exactly what year it was, about 10 or 11 or something, and so that was their biggest fear. Don't let anything die. Nothing can die, and animals do die from time to time, one or two here or there, but if they did, there was a full report as to what did the animal die from, and so it was just the management, their focus was all on don't let anything bad happen, rather than how many good things can we do.
Yeah, right. Cool.
And so that was
focusing on what they didn't want.
Exactly right. Yeah. So anyway, thankfully there was a new vice chancellor took over the university. He did a review of all the university assets, and he said we don't need a cattle station at Mataranka that hasn't seen a student for, it's seen 5 students a year for the last 4 or 5 years. It's just not part of our core business, and so they terminated the lease and made me redundant, and it was probably the best way it could have ended. So I was left in a good, given the golden handshake and the opportunity to go and do whatever I wanted to do. So yeah, that was where that got to.
What happened then? You went right. I can do anything now.
Pretty right. Yep. Obviously, that management job, all those roles, they give you a lot of security, and I kind of needed that. Trish and I got married September 2013, so it was the second year. And
what date?
29th. And I think it was
what time?
Everything happened in that very short period there, right? In that late 2013, and I think it must have only been, it was after then, like a month later, made redundant.
Right.
So we just got married. I had some pretty serious mental health issues by that point, and then got made redundant, and so I needed a job and that security for all those reasons. Had an obligation to contribute to our relationship financially, some security for Trish as to where we're going to be and what we're doing, all those sort of things. And anyway, that didn't, the management job didn't come to pass, but there's a lot of contracting goes on up there, right? So we had an ABN, we had our own cattle by that point, and we had an ABN. So I just started contracting, I drove a truck for a while, and then went broke some leaners in, and Harry was born. I'm getting the dates mixed up, but we were married September 2013, and 2014 was when things wrapped up 12 months later.
Right.
Did get my dates mixed up. So Harry, and then Harry's due in, so Trish was pregnant when I was made redundant. That's what that was. So that was why you have that
stress,
obligation for some security and a job and an income. And Harry was born in February, so we again. So I just started doing whatever I could find. A couple of weeks driving a truck here or there, doing whatever. And so when Harry was born, Trish took 12 months leave from the DPI. So she came with me and Harry, and we ended up doing nearly 2 years just contracting, and we went breaking weans in for a while. I did some welding for a while, drove a truck for a while, I was running a spraying contracting crew for a while, just bloody did whatever, and we kind of tried to stay fairly central to Catherine. We just lived in a diner, like a 20-foot diner, paid bugger all rent, saved a lot of money. We didn't have many overheads at that point. And then when Trish went back to work, obviously, so we were kind of bound to Catherine a bit. And I had just left one contracting job, and again, getting into a pretty ordinary place mentally. And a bloke rang me so I was spraying in this sandalwood plantation, running a contracting crew, spraying the sandalwood plantation, and I left that. And the bloke from the quarry rang me, the bloke from the plantation rang one day, and I was just at home kicking around doing nothing, and he said, there's a fire there, can you drive a grader? And I said, yeah. And he said, can you just come and jump in this grader for us? And I said, yeah, I'll probably do that. So I went down, went to the quarry, picked up the grader, went and put these fire breaks around this plantation, and everything was right. Went home that day, and the bloke from the quarry rang me the next morning. He said, come and have a yarn to us. He said, what are you up to? And I said, not much, just bloody poking around. And he said, have you got a truck license? I said, yeah. He said, well, do you want to get in a truck? And I said, yeah, I've got nothing else to do. So that was with Jeff. It was Jeff Rowland and his son Wombat, affectionately known as Wombat, Chris Rowland. Anyway, so I drove a truck for a few months, and I said to him, I said, look, I am looking for a full-time job, so I won't be here forever. But it was a low stress job, and I just used to get in a truck, 4 o'clock in the morning, drive to bloody Kalkaringi or somewhere and unload and gravel, and then drive way back, get home at bloody 7 or 8 or 9 o'clock at night, go home and do it again the next day. Again, on an hourly rate and a kilometre rate, I think, making plenty of money, no stress, but I had an income. I was away a few nights a week, but not every night of the week. And those guys were just really good to me. And at the time, that's what I needed. It was just some security, some cash flow. I could do, operate most of whatever they needed me to do there, drive the grader or roller or bloody trucks or whatever. And so through that period then, we were still looking for jobs and saw this job advertised down here at Wilmot, and obviously didn't say where it was or what it was, but it was the wording of the ad, kind of appealed to me.
Well, you saw it in what? In the
low
paper?
stress stock hand and grazing management. It was online. It was on. Jeff Lucas had it advertised, and by that point we just started thinking about leaving up north. So, looking outside the territory at opportunities, and so I rang Jeff and I said, that's the sort of job we'd be interested in. I'd known Jeff previously, and I said that's the sort of job we'd be interested in if you thought our skills suited. And anyway, about 5 interviews later, I think, and a trip down to Wilmot over a 2 or 3 month period, we got the job.
The job was for as a manager.
Manager at Wilmot.
Yeah, right.
And I was actually driving trucks with a bloke up there from Arnott, and I said, it's at Ebor, and I said, I've never heard of Ebor, I don't know where that is. He said, mate, that is God's country. Like, if you get that, he said, don't hang around here. And he wasn't wrong. So September 2016, we came down here, and we talked about being at Windy yesterday, and Anne Coote said some very kind words there yesterday when she introduced me to speak. And I was thinking about it last night. It was I said yesterday that it was the last 5 years have probably been the most meaningful years of my life. And I think I really meant that. I've felt like I've contributed more and achieved more in the last 5 years than, or something more meaningful than I have anywhere previously.
Well, you've got your roots down, haven't you?
Yeah.
In a good way.
I've been around the ridges a bit. You'd certainly, there'd be people look at my resume and think, geez, he's bloody been everywhere. But the inverse to that is that I've learned something everywhere I've been, and I've seen so many different things and been exposed to so many different skills, and I feel like I've kind of got a fairly well-rounded skill set now.
Let's talk about that, workplace principles. And you said that, having read John McGrath's book, you went back up north. There was a very clear change in your attitude, and that was reflected in people's, I guess, attitude back to you, and that's clearly been something that has been one of your principles, or a number of principles you take to wherever you go. What just sort of, can you highlight what some of the pillars of your workplace look like? What some of the principles or the expectations, the attitudes?
Yeah, the two goals that roll around every year on my goals are to help other people and make people laugh. And
you got a heap of like bad dad jokes and stuff.
Not really. The odd one-liner. I just made you laugh. There you go.
That's it.
Job done for the day.
Okay, thanks, Stuart. That's
enough. So that helping others, and the other thing about it, and this came from Lux, was that Lux is a pretty full-on person for anyone that works for him, but he does it because he really gives a shit. He really cares about people. Any young kid that turns up there to work, he takes it upon himself to help them become a better person. And that's something I've taken everywhere with me, is that I genuinely care about all the people that work for me. I'm interested in what their interests outside work are, what they want to achieve in their career, where they'd like to get to, what their future looks like, and how can I help them get there. And I don't take take issue with people leaving. I feel like as long as I've contributed something positive to them in the time that they've worked for me, then that's helped them get to the next stage in their life. So that's a big thing, and you know, people in our business is absolutely everything, and it's not about what we do, it's how we do it and how we think about what we do. You talk about it so brilliantly about the paddock between your ears, and you're absolutely correct. The way the landscape in Australia is managed is not the cattle's job or the grass's job. It's our job. It's people that do that, and good, bad, or otherwise, it's a result of actions and decisions that people have made in terms of the management of the landscape. So that's the main thing, mate, is how important they are, and the well-being of our people, how they're feeling, how they're going. You know, I try to be as supportive as I can be, and create a culture where people are comfortable to come and talk to me about whatever they need to. And you know, if there's things that they're not happy about, issues or whatever in the workplace, that I'm fairly open to and receptive to hearing them.
What's your communication sort of, I guess not so much style, but you know, do you meet with, how many staff have you got there?
There's only a small crew. We've got a manager on each farm.
Yeah.
Lisa, who is our admin girl, who does all office work, and then a casual station in on each farm.
Yeah.
So it's only a small crew. They all give me shit all the time because I've got a little earpiece thing that in my ear, that like a little Bluetooth thing. It's so handy, and I'm on the phone all the time. So if you haven't noticed, I talk a lot. So it's
good. That's handy when you're doing interviews.
So it's just a very open communication. You know, if I think of something, I'll give them a ring, and they don't always answer the phone, but they ring back, and you know, so we're talking about things all the time, and it's always about probably the trouble is I have so much time to think when I'm driving, so I'm constantly thinking of new ideas and new things we could do, and it's not up, you know, it's up to them to implement it. So I'll float the idea, and what do you think about this, and then you know, it's up to them to implement it, so, and choose to whether they'd like to or not.
Do you have weekly, daily, monthly check-ins with them?
We do have a monthly management meeting, yes.
Is that per property or
yeah.
as a group?
Yeah. So the structure of the business is there's a family office in Sydney, and there's a few guys work down there. So once a month, a couple of them will fly up, and normally for 2 days. So we'll try and visit, you know, one or all of the 3 farms. Do a bit of a tour, stop in, catch up with those guys on farm, and then we'll all get together, you know, at the end of those 2 days, and have a couple of hour management meeting where we'll go through a manager's report that they've circulated prior, and a finance report, and a market report. So probably the critical thing there is that finance report, that we're answerable to that every month. Yeah, it's a good monthly check-in. It's a good check-in for those guys too, that once a month they kind of stop and sit down and write what they've been up to, and you know, take stock of where they're at in terms of their stocking rate to carrying capacity, financially, cattle numbers wise, rainfall wise, where I'm at, how I'm going, and they've got to put in there what they plan, you know, what their activities are for the next month, and so where are we going the next month and 6 months and 12 months.
Yeah, nice. I noticed you got one of your colourful shirts on today, being Friday.
Yep.
Tell us about that.
So I'm pretty passionate about mental health and helping other people, and these shirts were made by Trademark, the boys in Brisbane.
Hang on. No power, mate. What's going on there? I have to change a copy.
Made by the boys in Brisbane, Dan and Ed, who were...
Sorry, what's the name of the shirt?
Trademark.
Trademark.
Yep.
Yeah, cool.
So the doggies on here somewhere.
Oh yeah.
That's the boys.
Oh yeah.
Anyway, the short story is they were chippies in Brisbane, and one of their mates committed suicide, and really affected them, and they wanted to do something that was meaningful and opened the conversation much, or normalised the conversation in the trades industry, basically. So the target audience is tradies, these loud shirts. People say, Jesus, mate, what's the bloody go with your shirt? And then you say, well, actually, it's just about, normalising the conversation around mental health. And on the back of the shirt, it says, this is a conversation starter. And so, anyway, I have shared my mental health story in a fair bit of detail with it on a My Grazing webinar last year that people can look up if they're interested to hear that. And so I just think it's a fantastic initiative, and it's rippled through the bush. There's, I saw the CPC guys the other day. They gave their whole crew all a trademark shirt. There's mine sites now. The boys have made ones that are high vis. If this isn't visible enough,
that's faded a little bit too.
Yeah, well, this is fairly new. That's the style. Anyway, they're great shirts. So I bought a crew one, and I said, why don't we make Friday shirts? And for the same reason that you blokes just recognising that if you're not feeling well, don't hesitate to come over the yarn to me. And one or two of our guys are a bit more conservative, and I don't think it's ever come out of the cupboard again. But
so there's no like, hey mate, you go home and put your Friday shirt on.
No. Would completely defeat the purpose of the concept of the Friday shirt and normalising the conversation.
You give them the opportunity.
And actually, interestingly, that raises the thought I just had a minute ago when talking about principles in the business. One of the other guys who was quite influential for a short period of time when I was up north was a guy called Charlie Corns, who tragically passed away at Newcastle Waters when I was there, and that did bloody have an impact on me, I can tell you. And anyway, but Charlie, one of the things that someone said upon reflection of Charlie's life was he never told anyone to do anything. He always said, "Would you mind?" And I've never forgotten that. And so I always have that in my mind too now, that I very rarely tell any of our guys to do something. I always ask them if they would mind doing something or suggest that they might like to consider doing this. And then it becomes their idea. Then it's up to them, and particularly that these guys are managers of those farms. So I want them to take ownership of the farm. I don't want them thinking, I've got to wait till Stu tells me what I've got to do on this farm and how to manage it before I go and manage it. I want them to be thinking, I'm responsible for this farm. I'm going to treat this farm like I own it. And I'm basically just offering some thoughts, guidance, advice, suggestions for them to consider implementing. And there are times that I suggest things with a bit more forthright manner.
Sternly.
But and all that does hopefully is just make them realise that this is probably something pretty important, and this will probably have a bigger effect than that thing you just suggested last week, because it might be nice to do.
That's an interesting one, because it's just sort of a tactic I employ, and it's certainly something I learned from my father. He was always suggesting things, and when the younger you are, the more prone you are to probably ignoring it, especially coming from your father. But as an employer, I like that tactic. How when you're suggesting something quite sternly, because from experience that's what works best. Whether it's how you move a mob of cattle through a paddock or whatever it happens to be, a way to do something. And that doesn't happen. Like, you're very stern, and you're nice and you're diplomatic, and it's pretty clear to most people that's probably how the boss wants it done, and that doesn't happen. What do you do?
I ask why.
So the job gets done differently, let's just say,
or it doesn't get done at all. Doesn't get implemented. Yeah. It's not so much about. I suppose that there's times there's jobs or things to implement into the operation. Ask why, and which comes back to me having not given them an opportunity to perhaps discuss that thing. If the conversation has been fairly one-sided, where I've suggested they do something but haven't given them an opportunity to suggest to oppose their thoughts, or they've gone away and thought about it and thought, actually, I don't think it's a good idea, but they haven't come back to me and told me why they didn't think it was a good idea. So then when I ask why, I open that conversation, give them an opportunity to say, well, this is why. I think, okay, that's fair enough. And then we have a conversation, well, this is why I thought it would be a good idea. And then, we have a bit more of a conversation about it, I suppose. But it's interesting, we did some personality type that Myers-Briggs with our 3 managers last year, and out of that comes, you know, the what people are like if they're this particular personality type, or what they need. And some people actually need very clear, very detailed instructions. This is how I want you to do it, and this is what I want you to do.
So not so much a suggestion, but more of a
quite a direct, detailed
instruction.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that was an important thing for me to recognise, was that actually some of these guys do want to be told what to do, and they do want some clear directions and some clear instructions and details. And so, you know, again, it comes back to that effective communication. If I haven't done that, then it's probably more my fault than theirs. And the other part is, you know, one of our guys in particular, he likes the opportunity to think about things, have some time to think about things, and he has been through enormous change, and in himself and the business and so forth, and he often will come back to me a week or 2 weeks later, and he's built on that idea and made it even better. And I say, yep, absolutely.
And that's on the back of suggestion or instruction?
Suggestion.
Yeah. Again.
What do you think about this?
Yeah. So he goes and thinks.
Yep. And he doesn't. He might not say much at the time, but then he'll come back a couple of weeks later, and some things he turns into absolute genius. And it's just about giving. It's just a different personality type where he just needs a bit of time to go home and think about it. Get an exhaust, drive around the farm, do whatever, and then he'll come back to me and say, I thought about that thing, and I reckon we should do this as well.
So therein lies a good point, I reckon, that about being prepared, that you know, if I guess it comes back to you, if you're the one giving the instructional suggestions, knowing what needs to be done in the future, the earlier you can give them that heads up, the more time this particular fellow has to talk about it, as opposed to saying, hey mate, this afternoon we've got a big job, and I reckon we should do it this way. He's got no time to think about it, and he mightn't grasp that whole thing, and then you mightn't get the best out of him because he hasn't had the time that he needs to bubble for these wonderful things to bubble to the surface.
Yeah, absolutely.
So being preemptive.
Yeah, and the other great thing I've learned in life, there's 2 things there. One is it's got to become their idea. And until something is their idea, they won't have full buy-in or full ownership of it. And the other, it's probably not quite as relevant, but the other thing I've learned about people and helping other people is that you can't help those who don't want to be helped. And this is, I'm not talking about our staff now or our crew, but just people in general. There are people in life that I've come across and interacted with and had, you know, relationships with who I can see potential, can see how much more they could achieve in their life, but they don't want to. And so, and there's only a few. This is not many people, but there's been a few where I've just had to walk away and say, I'm sorry, mate, but I can't help you anymore, because it actually quite affects me that they don't want to be better. They can be so much better.
And they might be an employee at that time.
Yep.
And then is that sort of, then that leads to you know, they've got to go.
They find their own way out, basically.
Yeah. You give them a good reason to. That's got to be bloody cold now.
That's all right. Still good.
I was just thinking, mate, I need to go and drain the spades.
We haven't talked much about regeneration yet, but
well, this is.
This is
about regeneration. This is about your life. You know, there's a clear regeneration or generation of in your life. You know, as it proceeds.
Yeah.
You know, and that's a wonderful thing. I'm just wondering whether I ask you a question. I go drain the spades. I'll be about 30 seconds. I've never done this before. I'll have to go.
It happened yesterday at Windy when
you're on stage.
No, when Maddie was about to speak, and then she told me after she did the same thing. When I got up to talk, she went to the toilet.
So I'm just going to duck. You don't have to talk. I'll get Reece to cut this bit out, so no one has to listen to the gurgle of the. back. Sorry, mate. Where were we? Workplace principles. Any other? Because I know that's important to you, and you've been, very successful. Is probably not the right word, but very effective in doing that. Because I don't necessarily know your employees, but I know the sort of attitude. I know you reasonably well. See you enough online and to sort of understand your sort of the vibe you create. Any other sort of tips? I mean, it's really, I'm keen to understand, for my listeners' sake and me, what other things can we learn from your workplace, again, principles and attitude? It's clearly effective,
Well, yeah. Thank you. I do. It's a very positive culture that I try and create, and a very progressive culture. Probably part of the reason I'm in the position that I'm in is because I have that approach and that attitude, and I really want to get shit done. And like I said, I'm impatient, so I'm in a hurry to do as much as I can in this short dash, I suppose. One thing that came to mind there was pride and ego are our two biggest limiting factors, I think. And what comes in line with that is the tall poppy syndrome. And as an industry, we've got to bloody get over ourselves. Yes, I think we should be proud of what we do. Yes, I think we should be quite comfortable and open and happy to talk about what we do and why we do it. But for God's sake, stop shooting each other down and holding people back. And the other part of it is that it's what gets in the way. Pride and ego are what gets in the way of making better decisions. And having that capacity, through the drought was a great example where people just having that capacity to step back and say, righto, this isn't working. I'm out of ideas. I need some new knowledge. Who can I go and ask? How can I find that information? What else can I do? What can I do differently that will lead to a better outcome so that I feel better about it? And it was almost became competitive through the drought to see who would spend the most amount of money on feed and supplement, and who had the biggest story to tell, and it's absolute bloody rubbish. And that's just one example, but there's so many times in the industry where pride and ego get in the way of people making better decisions and being better people. So that's probably, I don't know how that necessarily flows through our business. I suppose I do. Obviously, I talk a lot about what we do at Wilmot Cattle Company, and I do that to help others. I don't do that to beat our own drum and tell everyone how bloody good we are, or it's not about stroking my own ego. It's about sharing what we do for the benefit of other people, such that they might go and do some of those things on their place and their landscape, which hopefully will lead to better ecological outcomes for their landscape, better people outcomes, and better community outcomes.
Just getting back to what you said there, Stu, about I guess to me it's about letting go, let it go, and that's also reflective of one of the low stress stock handling principles is sometimes you just got to let it go. Like the steers just got round behind you, and you I used to get a bit cranky about that and go and chase the bloody thing, and I'm going to show it bloody where it needs to go, as opposed to it's gone and you just go, you know what, clearly needed to go there.
Yeah.
I'm just going to let it go. It's gone. And 9 times out of 10, I think the bloody thing will come back anyway.
Yeah.
As an example, but it's a good sort of analogy for that sort of attitude. And just back to sort of being open, that to a point I made yesterday at the Windy Field Day, which was, let's give that a quick plug now. It was. I'm going to get the whole spiel wrong, but it was about building resilient communities through the rehydration of landscape down there in the Liverpool Plains, and the Upper Mookai Landcare Group ran that program, and it was amazing day. Talking about the first session was talking about the project in itself, and we had a number of the landholders up there talking about their contribution and what they did, and the riparian zone sort of improvements and fencing and so on, which was fantastic. And then we had before lunch and after lunch sessions, 4 farmers from each of those sessions from around the area, going as far out to sort of Boggabri and Narrabri, I think, and around about, just talking about their implementation of regenerative practices, and that they on their farms, and the, to your point, you know, they were so open, so honest, so supportive of each other as well. You know, there wasn't a hint of competition. It was all about, I'm here just to share my story. And you know, some of the stories, you know, there's wasn't just about, oh, then I bloody plant this and I move a cow there. It's sort of, you know, how it impacted their mental health, how it's changed their lives. You know, some really wonderful stories there.
It was a fantastic day. I drove from there back to here and I was just on a high. Like, I was really pumping that. Absolute credit to Craig and Nikki and all the work they put into that project and that day yesterday. And they're fantastic people. You know, the same thing. They just want to help other people.
And Anne Coot.
Bandicoot. There was another bloke there emceeing as well. He did a pretty good job.
Some bloody ring in.
But it was fantastic, you know, and really, I have been critical of broadacre cropping, you know, management, I suppose, and we were talking about it last night. The last couple of presentations I've seen on that haven't given me much hope that those guys are doing much different. But the stories we heard yesterday were absolutely brilliant, and you know, Andrew Watson, Scotty McCallum, Ian Carter. They are doing things differently, and really, like Scott McCallum's story just bloody blew me away. Like, that is fantastic. And he, you know, I'd spoken to Scott a few times in the past, but it was the first time I met him. But at the end of the day, he was just like, he was bloody jumping up and down. He was so excited. And I think those guys, I think they enjoyed. I don't know. You know, I'm not speaking for them, but I felt like they enjoyed the opportunity to share their story amongst some people who were really receptive to it. Going, oh, mate, that's bloody terrific. Where I wondered whether amongst their peers, because they were doing things differently, they may not be, you know, they might not be so willing to share their story for fear of, you know, the whole tall poppy syndrome. What the hell are you doing that for? That won't bloody work. And one of the things about this whole regenerative kind of community, I suppose, is being very open to doing things differently and looking at things from a different perspective and questioning things, and those guys have done that, and it was bloody credit to them.
There's a real sense of not that they weren't there to bang their own drum. It was a real sense of excitement to share, to help others. Absolutely. And just say, this can be done.
Yep.
You know, absolutely. I've done it. If I can bloody do it, you know, it can be done. And that was, I think we were talking about last night too, Stu, that there wasn't sort of, because sometimes, you know, in gatherings, understandably, big and small, there's often, you know, pushback. There are questions that can be pointed, and you know, there's sort of like, and that's a really a good thing. We want to be challenged in our thinking, and that can be done via questions. But there wasn't sort of, there was a really openness of the audience to those ideas, wasn't it? There wasn't people sort of arms crossed, huffy and puffy. They bothered to come all the way from wherever they were to Windy to listen, and I think they got. I can't imagine anyone would have gone home last night going, "Oh, it was a waste of a day."
Yeah, exactly right.
And $75 or whatever it was.
Yeah, exactly right. Where there's those polarising discussions are becoming less and less, and that's a really exciting thing. And every one of those days that I go to, and it's the same up at Wilmot when we have the mine grazing day. There's people there, and it's the first, you know, regenerative sort of a field day that they've been to, and they kind of blown away again. This isn't crazy. This isn't witchcraft. This is, you know, we're doing a few of these things already, and you know, thank you so much for being so open and being willing to talk about what you guys do, and you know, there's no competitiveness. It's just around looking at things differently and considering things differently. So, and it was the same yesterday. That, you know, sure, there's plenty of people there didn't ask questions, but they didn't leave either. You know, they stayed the course there the whole day, and have gone home thinking about things differently.
It was a solid day too. A lot of sitting, a lot of listening.
Yeah.
I want to just jump to carbon, Stu. I know you've been involved in that for some period of time and quite intensively in the last couple of months. I don't need to go into the detail. Why have you and the business jumped into that arena? And what are your thoughts on it and the future of this whole carbon? I guess it is an industry now, isn't it? There are businesses built around it. There are farmers, putting it in the ground. There's adds a whole other layer of colour, and more than colour, financial benefit. So I don't know where you want to start there.
That's a big question, Charlie, and to try and summarise it, I suppose, as succinctly as I can, and we see it as a huge opportunity for landholders to secure, I suppose, put some financial security, underpin their business with some financial security that is not short-term reliant on weather conditions, and it's also an opportunity for agriculture to shine as more than just an industry that supplies food to a growing population, but an industry that is reversing climate change, and through better landscape management and sequestering carbon, we will restore the landscape of Australia. So that's a very high level view of things, but that's how we see it, is that, and I've said it time and again, we don't consider ourselves carbon farmers. We're a beef production business, and built around grazing management, and our focus is on grass first and foremost, and if we manage our grass, then our animals will live a fantastic life. Our production will be good. There's never any animal welfare issues because we're managing our grass, not our animals. And as a result of that, we have a financially profitable business from our beef production, core business of beef production and grazing management that's based on grazing management. As a result of that, we build carbon in our soil, which is carbon that we have taken out of the atmosphere and stored in our soils. And the rest of the world is talking about greenhouse gases and carbon in the atmosphere and how we can get it out of the atmosphere. And all we've done is demonstrated through very rigorous data that we've taken thousands of tonnes of that gas out of the atmosphere and put it in our soils, and we intend to keep it there for a long time. And so that's an incredibly positive story for the agriculture industry to tell. To all of a sudden, the people in Canberra and so forth are standing up going, "What do you mean? It's because our numbers are demonstrating we're massively carbon positive. We've taken 4 or 5 times more carbon out of the atmosphere than we've emitted out the front and back end of a cow." And it's just, no one's, it seems, has been able to put together the level of data that we have up until this point. And now all of a sudden, we did a deal that was worth a significant amount of money, a large enough amount of money for people to sit up and take notice. And all of a sudden the wheels are turning, and like I said, we don't intend for our business to be built around soil carbon. Our core business has and always will be production of really nutrient-dense grass-fed beef. But this is a co-benefit and something that's I suppose commodity is not a word that I necessarily like to attach to carbon credits, but they are effectively a tradable commodity that the big business is looking to buy, and they've been buying them for years. They've been buying them from savanna burning and human-induced revegetation and veg plantings and planting trees and all these sort of things, and all of which are based around less emissions. And what we are focused on is actually, which still means gas is getting in the atmosphere. What we're trying to do, the story we're trying to get out there is that actually we're taking a lot of that gas out of the atmosphere and putting it in our soils, as opposed to just emitting less of it.
Sorry, go on.
No, that's probably it, mate. In terms of how we view carbon, and the word we use there is co-benefit. That revenue stream that we'll generate from and are generating from carbon is a co-benefit to our beef production business. Our beef production business has to be profitable first and foremost. It's not going to be, a supplementary income that props up the beef business. That's not an excuse for us not to make money from livestock production. We actually don't have carbon anywhere on our budget or our P&L. We've probably got to write it in the next year, but there's been some expenses and some income from it, so we've got to scratch it in there somewhere. But it's as I say, it's been a co-benefit of our beef production business, and that's how we'll view it.
I think the good news there, one of the good news is that, and we were talking about it again last night, you guys are demonstrating the sequestration of carbon from the atmosphere into your soil and staying there, and that allows you then to jump into the marketplace, because there's a value on that carbon, and you're able to leverage that, and that's all happening on farm. Right. Yeah. As opposed to the notion of measuring emission from a farm or a situation and offsetting that by buying, paying for offsets elsewhere, and that being it's a totally different transaction, but it's more about the headspace, the decisions that are made around, and the allaying of guilt, as it were, around that carbon production. And it's interesting, and I think what you're doing, as opposed to going, oh well, I'm emitting this much and I'm going to plant trees in India to offset it, what you're doing is your whole focus is on farm and what you're doing on farm.
Yeah, exactly.
And food is food in as you say, the co-benefit there is it's food production.
Yeah.
What, just on that, as a managing that situation, it's interesting because I struggle with the commoditisation of carbon. I'm not sure where to sit. I'm very open-minded about it all, and I think there's a real opportunity to I am going to, and I want to have a chat with you some other time about it, because given the research you've been doing, saved me having to do 3 years of it. I've been watching it for 15 years trying to work it out. I remember going to the first one, a little course in Young. It'd be 14 years ago now. And it felt like what I've been dipping in and out of for the last 14 years. There's been some change, but there's still a fair bit of greyness there. Yeah. But in terms of the priority or the focus, you're focusing on, and this is again for the benefit hopefully of other farmers in a situation considering it. You're focusing on, I'm producing good beef. How do I do that? I graze them in a particular way, and I've got some other management sort of principles in place that then creates carbon. Then I can then sell, as opposed to, there's bloody money to make in this carbon. How do I put that in there? Oh, I've got to, there's some way. Oh, I need to graze animals in a certain way. Oh, and shit, they happen to be. It's a better type of food. You know what I mean?
Yep.
There's two. It's the same flow, but it's going different ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I say, our core focus is on our beef production business and grazing management. And probably the critical thing here for people to understand, and going back to your point around how we make that calculation around our emissions versus our offsetting that and so forth, is that within any carbon scheme, which I don't particularly like that word, but they are all schemes, I suppose, for want of a better word, there is this thing in there called practice change, and all these carbon schemes have come out of the Paris Agreement and the COP, I suppose it was, whatever that stood for.
I'll have to look it up.
That big, where all the world's leaders get together and climate something. Anyway,
yeah, they
all come out of that.
They all burn a heap of bloody carbon to get out
exactly
of there.
Right. So, but they're all about that. It's all based on practice change. So they want people to start doing something different that leads to better ecological outcomes. And the reward for doing that is more carbon in our soil, or more carbon, less carbon going to the atmosphere, if it's a veg project or a savanna burning or something like that, doing something differently. So in the savanna burning example, it was around, landholders up north burning country in the early dry season such that it was a much cooler burn, there was less emissions, as opposed to letting that country burn late dry season where it smoked everything, pardon the pun, and emitted a lot more carbon. So the practice change was actually culturally burning earlier rather than letting it burn later. So an example in the soil carbon method is a change in grazing management, intensification of grazing they call it, where moving from a set stock system or a low rotation system to a more intensive planned grazing system at higher density, moving more frequently, increased rest periods. By doing that, the landscape will become healthier. The resilience of the landscape will improve. And how that's measured is through an increase in carbon levels in our soil, because we're producing more biomass, we're creating a more perennial system, deeper rooted plants, increasing the diversity in that sward, and so the carbon credit is kind of the reward at the end of it. That's what you then have to sell as in addition to the animals that you've produced. So that's very much how we see it, and I suppose that's something that people have got to recognise, that if they want to participate in any of these carbon methods, they will have to undertake something new and different, which is that's not a bad thing. It's because like I said, they're all designed around creating better ecological outcomes. Things like converting cropland to grazing land, and which is what we're doing at Morocco, where because the climate has changed and some of that more marginal cropland that we cropped, started cropping 40 or 50 or 60 years ago, when seasons were more reliable and before we'd had such an impact on our climate, it was good cropping country. And now it's far less reliable, which means that it's less financially reliable, which means greater reliance on government support. So the government's sort of saying, well, actually now, unfortunately, because the climate's changed, there's areas of Australia now that are not suited to cropping as they were a few decades ago. So if you participate in one of these methods and convert that back to pasture land, to a grazing system that's lower risk, then we'll reward you for that.
Mate, I'm just looking at the time there. You've got to get going west. So just to clarify, Morocco, not the place in the northwest of Africa. We're talking about the name of property as part of the Wilmot Cattle Co portfolio.
Yep.
Up to here, just to go and ask. So a couple of hours from here. Just he's going. What is flying? He's bloody contributing to the emission of carbon by flying to Morocco, grazing country over there. You've got to go west. I've got to go north very shortly. But before we go, mate, there's another hour. I haven't even asked half the bloody questions. But mate, let's finish on. You've got an opportunity to put a billboard up on the New England Highway just behind us here that everyone can see, and you have the opportunity to put a quote, a statement, a question up there. What would you put up there? You can't put rude pictures.
This is a theme, and a recurring theme amongst podcasts is these quirky questions that they...
Oh, no, I stole it from Tim Ferriss. I'm just waiting for him to steal one of my questions. It's never going to happen.
What I like people to understand, or I'll tell you one that's probably appropriate for today is, and it comes back to people, is be kind. Would be it.
That's very good.
Today is actually Dolly's day.
Let's talk. Tell us about that.
So Dolly Everett was a young girl from the Northern Territory who took her own life a few years ago after boarding school in southern Queensland. And today is a commemoration for the day. So the other reason that I'm wearing the shirt, there's a bit of, most people are wearing a blue shirt today, there's a bit of plenty of blue through this one for Dolly, and the day is all about being kind to others, and I think as a society, if we can be kind to her, we'll all get along a lot better and all lead much happier lives. And again, comes back to bloody pride and ego, the two most powerful things in the world. It's what starts world wars, and it's what stops neighbours talking to each other. And you know, getting over ourselves and accepting everyone for who they are, and just being kind to each other. And you know, if you take that into a broader producer-consumer context, that if we all just have a bit of respect for each other and a bit of acknowledgement of the role we each play in the world, and treat each other with a bit of kindness, I think we'll improve that relationship between consumer and producer.
Yeah, and also I just add to that, be kind to as farmers, and also to consumers, and for consumers to sort of give the feedback and the support to farmers, is compassion.
Yeah.
Compassion,
yeah.
Which is a form of kindness. It's pretty much the same thing, just different spelling. Being kind, you know, do no harm, that's to people and landscape, and reverence for both. Reverence for life, you know, as a human being and their own journey, and also reverence for the landscape that we are caretakers of.
Yeah.
You know, and showing compassion and gratitude to that.
Yeah.
I think it's a wonderful thing for farmers to a wonderful thing for farmers to consider in their day when they step out of off the veranda,
yeah.
with their boots on and the day in front of them, to consider their relationship with landscape and other people.
Yeah, and themselves. Be kind to yourself. Don't, you know, again, get over ourselves and recognise that we don't have all the answers, we don't know everything, and every day is a learning journey, and every day we make mistakes, and the important thing is to learn from. We can't change the past, and focus on what you can control.
Good call. Stu, that's been wonderful. We might have to do this again another time, just as a bit of an update on whatever
Sure.
happened. And may you have a lovely day out west. I'll be going north for another interview this morning before I keep going north. And yeah, it's been an honour and a real pleasure there this morning.
Thank you, mate. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. And I was just reflecting there a minute ago that I don't think I've ever told my whole story in as much detail as I have. So hopefully people get through it. You know.
Mate, they will, and that's the idea. You know, if I can put, you know, something in that coffee to make you loosen up a bit, which I've done. No, I haven't. Is a truth serum.
That's actually the sunset out there. It's actually 7 o'clock in the 5 o'clock in the afternoon.
My God, it's 12 hours later. That was fun. We'll catch up soon too.
Right,
I hope.
thank you. Yeah.
Thanks, mate.
Thanks, Charlie. Good on you.